Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by nobody. Who writes enough unit tests? Nobody. Episode 221. React-native-colo-loco. Colocate your native modules with your JSX.
Before the show, Mazen and I were actually talking a little bit about some really I found this fascinating, some mentoring that you're doing, Mazen, but it's like for code students, right?
Correct.
In Gaza?
Yeah. So there's a code academy out there called Gaza Sky Geeks, which I believe is sponsored by Google for Startups.
Oh, that's cool. And it's a really kind of interesting thing because of the conflict that is sort of, inherent, I guess, in that whole region. And I was just sort of like, I remember we were talking about it and I was just like, well, maybe you could do it in person sometime. You're like,
Yeah, not possible.
not because you're like scared of it or anything, but literally you might not be allowed to.
Correct. Yeah. And based on the blockade in Gaza too, it makes it a little bit hard for the students going through it as they're looking to graduate and try and find jobs. Most of the time they kind of have to go through remote opportunities.
Yeah, totally. And I think your wife is Palestinian.
Correct. And I'm Lebanese by origin.
You're Lebanese, and that complicates things for that whole thing. And then also, you're actually going to be teaching it in Arabic. Is that correct?
Yes. This will be the first time I will be doing a technical talk of any sorts in Arabic. Now, they do speak English, but majority of them only speak Arabic. So I have to stick to Arabic. And then,
So how good's your Arabic?
I'm fluent in it. I've just never had a technical talk in Arabic. So I wouldn't know how to talk about hooks and all that kind of stuff in Arabic.
Yeah. Well, so this is my American ignorance coming out here, but like, I would assume that you would just use the English words for things like hooks.
Correct. Yeah. I'm also going to demo like a React Native app, and I would still code in English because that's how they've been coding and that's what they've learned. Yeah. I just think when it comes to explaining concepts, it would have to be done in Arabic rather than English.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I assume I guess for me it's just really cool that they get a chance to have contact with what to them is probably like a very exciting opportunity, a software developer in the United States who's working on really cool stuff and kind of has all this experience. But it's also cool for you because you get a chance to kind of connect into that community, which is pretty marginalized. So it's really cool. I don't know, like to me that really stood out as something that I don't know. I guess if I knew another language, I know a little Finnish, but like I don't know much, and I know a tiny bit of German, but not much. But both of those communities are already pretty technically advanced. They probably don't need me to speak to them, and a lot of them speak English too. So yeah.
So how did they find you?
So I've been doing mentoring for a while now, and just recently there was an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, kind of highlighting Gaza Sky Geeks as an organization because they did get this large funding from UNICEF recently. And when I saw that, I kind of, piqued my interest. I looked at their website and I saw that they were asking for mentors. And like I said, I've been mentoring for a couple years now at a local code school here in Durham. And I felt like this would probably be a little more rewarding for me to do, especially with the whole Arabic aspect of it. So I reached out to them. They emailed me back within a day of sending that email. We set up a call, and once they heard my background, the guy was like, actually, hold on. You have React Native experience. I polled the class out of the 25 cohorts members, 17 replied to his email if they would be interested in a React Native course. And they were all like, yes, let's have this tomorrow.
Wow.
So he was like, I want to bring you on as a mentor for a specific student. And then I also want you to kind of give this crash course. So I'll be giving the crash course towards the end of the month.
That's awesome. You're going to have to let us know how that goes because that's super, super cool.
Yeah.
So I guess I should do intros. I'm Jamon Holmgren, your host and friendly CTO of Infinite Red, and I'm joined today by my awe-inspiring co-hosts, Jon Major and Mazen. Jon Major Condon is a senior software engineer here at Infinite Red, lives in Janesville, Wisconsin, also editor-in-chief of the React Native newsletter. How's your Arabic, Jon Major?
It's getting there. No, it's not. Not at all.
Fun fact, we actually have two people at Infinite Red who speak Arabic, because Harris, who is another co-host sometimes on the podcast, also speaks Arabic, which is pretty cool. I don't know if you two have talked at all, Mazen, or spoken in Arabic or anything, but I think that's kind of neat.
Yeah, we did once, and I've reached out to him about giving this talk in Arabic and see if he'd help me out.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Smart.
And that's, of course, Mazen Chami, lives in Durham, North Carolina, former pro soccer player and coach, and is a senior React Native engineer, also here at Infinite Red, and also a mentor, which is very cool. I like that. I of course, have taught junior developers, over the years, and it's always super rewarding. This episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. We are a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next React Native project, hit us up. You can learn more on our website, infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. And also, you can come work for us. We are hiring, so if you're a senior level React Native engineer located in the US or Canada, go to careers.infinite.red and fill out the form. Looking forward to hearing from you. All right, let's get into our topic for today. So the title of the episode is react-native-colo-loco. Unless I change it, I guess, before we go publish. I think it's going to be react-native-colo-loco. And so let's talk about this new package that I made.
Yeah, I'll get us started here. I do like the name Colo-Loco. Maybe because every time I read it, I usually emphasize the loco part, but that's fine. So, Jamon, tell me a little bit more about the inspiration behind this package and what prompted you to create it, because I know this is not the first one that you've done.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of funny because I was just talking to Lizzie, one of our developers, and telling her that I don't feel very creative these days. I don't feel like I come up with a lot of, new ideas and whatnot. And literally, like the next week, or actually, no, it was the same week because we were at our offsite, our team retreat, and we were discussing, building native modules. And I don't even remember who I was talking to, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just drop your Swift and Kotlin files right next to your JSX and TSX files? And React Native would pick up on those and link them in automatically. And you wouldn't have to really think about it. You just put in like .swift, my component.swift. And it just loads it up and you have it available in your JavaScript or your TypeScript. So that idea just sort of led to me starting to hack on it. I get in these moods where I'm like, this is a cool idea. I want to see where it goes, and then I just start hacking on it. And if I see progress, then I get energized by that. And so my mind was just working on it the whole week. It was like I had a background process just working on this, and I actually made some progress there at the team retreat.
As someone who was there, I was a witness to Jamon's wheels turning, and the whole time we'd be having a conversation, and Jamon just like staring into the distance, thinking about what he could do next. So yes.
So true.
Well, cool. So I heard that you're doing this on your Twitch live stream. And if those who do not know, Jamon has a live stream on Twitch.
Yeah, you can go to rn.live and it'll go right to it.
Yeah.
If you don't have Twitch, by the way, you can go to youtube.infinite.red and I co-cast it, what do you call it? Multicast it over to YouTube as well. And a lot of people do join via YouTube instead.
Nice. And so you mentioned that Copilot has a pretty big role in helping you here. So
yeah.
Do you want to go through and talk about it some more?
So GitHub Copilot is amazing. And I don't talk about it very often, but it is honestly an incredible innovation. And I think that a lot of Twitter developers think it's just a toy. But I'm telling you right now, just as a secret to the 5,000 people subscribed to this podcast, it's not a toy. Mm-hmm. It's a real serious tool. It's really cool. And in order to build this, I had to use several languages I haven't used in a while or haven't used at all. And not only that, but I was doing some kind of, funky stuff with it. And GitHub Copilot really made a difference. It allowed me to kind of explore things. I don't know, honestly, I was able to do basically what I would call comment-driven development, where I could write a comment and it would attempt to write the code and I could tweak it from there. it was so funny. Like at the end of the time together that we were working together on this in the team retreat, someone, I don't remember who, was it you, Mazen? Someone wrote on a sticky note, Copilot's Copilot, and put it on me. And another person put presses tab to code. I think it's actually kind of more accurate than I want to admit. It was amazing how much of this code that Copilot wrote.
Yeah.
You know, this makes so much more sense now because when I was looking through the code, I saw so many comments, more than usual when looking through source code. And I was going to say that like it's an awesome thing that you did that because again, like you don't see that often.
Yeah, it's amazing because you just give it hints and it will pick up on those and go from there. I don't know. We could do a whole episode on GitHub Copilot, I think, and it's amazing.
So I know you said you use Copilot heavily in a new language that you hadn't used. What is Copilot? Sorry, what is Colo-Loco written in?
So it's really 3 scripts. One is a Ruby script, which I've done Ruby. I did Ruby for 5 years, so I know Ruby pretty well, but I also haven't done it for over 6 years. Not like extensively, at least. And so that gets triggered in the pod file. So you basically drop in some code into your pod file, and when you run pod install, it will run the Ruby script and essentially what it does, what the Ruby script does is it goes in and it looks for any .h, .m, or .swift files. So that would be Objective-C or Swift files. And then it goes into your Xcode project file and adds those. It links those in. And what's really cool about Xcode project files is that they can link in source files from any location. They don't have to be in a specific location. It's different for Android, but for Xcode, I could just simply add them there. There's a Ruby gem, which is like an NPM module, but for Ruby, that allows me to manipulate those. It's already included in CocoaPod, so I didn't have to add any new dependencies. And then essentially, you just run pod install and it will link up all of your native files that are co-located. That's where the colo-loco thing comes from, co-located with your JavaScript, JSX, and TSX files. Now, that was Ruby, but I also had to write a script for Android. And Android has Gradle, and Gradle is generally written in Groovy, not Ruby, not like Kotlin. It's Groovy. Now you can use Kotlin as well, but if you just spin up a new React Native app, it's going to have a Groovy script. Now, I've never used Groovy before, so I actually leaned on GitHub Copilot quite a bit to give me hints on how to write this. It was sometimes wrong. It would actually put in like Python code. The Ruby stuff, it was great at. I honestly barely wrote any of that. I just wrote comments and it would finish stuff, and it was amazing at Ruby. But on Groovy, it would basically drop in what it thought, and then I did a little bit of research and stuff. But on the Groovy one, now this is kind of interesting. There isn't like a project file that you can add these Kotlin or Java files to. But what you can do is we did essentially a hard link. So it's like a symlink, but it's a hard link. It's like actually to the file system. It's like the file. It looks like the file, and drop it into the right position in the Android project, and also modify a few files to instantiate these classes and make sure that they're available to you. So a little bit complicated, but like Jon Major said, it's very well commented if you go through those 2 scripts, and you can kind of see what's happening. They're not super long either. I mean, I don't know. I don't have it right in front of me, but they're like 100 lines of code each.
Yeah. And at first you mentioned there were 3 scripts. So I'm assuming the third one would be like a setup script of sorts. What was the function of that script?
So when I was kind of like writing out the documentation, I noticed that there were a lot of there was a lot of like nitty gritty stuff you had to do, and you had to drop in certain files in certain locations. And it just felt like it was getting in the way of the coolness of what Colo-Loco could do for you. And so I was like, okay, well, I want it to be like kind of punchy. Like you get in there, you can just run a script, and then you can just start working with your Kotlin files or your Swift files. So what happens is, like, once you add react-native-colo-loco, you can just run npx install colo-loco, and it will actually go in there and patch the right files for you and add everything in where it needs to be. and works surprisingly well, especially with an Ignite project or a vanilla React Native project. And that is actually written in JavaScript. It runs via Node. So you're just running npx. And, I was in my element there because obviously I've been doing a lot of JavaScript the last 6 years.
Cool. And you said it's available via npx. So I'm guessing this is now released. Is it version 0.99 or what are you looking at?
Yeah. No, I actually did release 1.0 in the last live stream. So I've been hacking on this for a couple weeks now. And it seems to be working pretty well overall. I'm really curious to see how this affects things.
Cool. How do you think this might change native modules in the future? Specifically, you mentioned this being in Ignite.
So, and I guess for you guys, like, how often do you go in and write native modules right now? Pretty rare, right?
Yeah, very rare.
Yeah. And so part of that is that you don't necessarily need to, and that's great. But also part of it is because it's kind of a pain. So you generally avoid it.
Totally.
Yeah, it's pretty cumbersome.
Right. Like you're having to dig into the Android, deep into the Android folder structure. You got to make sure you instantiate things properly. You got to make sure that, you're always looking up documentation. You're deep in Stack Overflow. You're like, the documentation isn't all that good. In fact, in a recent React Native Radio episode, actually 2 of them, we talked about iOS and Android native modules. Mm-hmm. And, it's pretty cumbersome. So I'm really just trying to reduce the friction to writing a native module. And it's not just native modules. There's also native UI components as well. So you can create a view manager, which essentially instantiates a view and then, handles like setting properties on that view. So you can do native components as well and just, require native component and bring it in and use it like a JSX, React component right in your code. So the idea here is make it easier, make it more simple. And then also, since it's co-located, you can put the files right next to where they're used, which is nice because it's like, rather than, oh, hey, this JavaScript module or component or whatever requires this native one, which, by the way, is in 2 different places somewhere else in your project, and deep inside the Android folder, deep inside the iOS folder. And it just makes things harder, where if you can just have like mycomponent.swift, mycomponent.kotlin, and mycomponent.tsx right next to each other, like you've got everything you need right there and you can just pull it in. And it's kind of a cool idea. So my idea here, and what I'm kind of like hoping to see how this changes, is that native modules become a seamless part of writing React Native apps rather than a friction-full part, if that's a word.
Yeah, the linking aspect usually what deters me, mainly because you never know where you could go wrong. And most of the times I kind of lean towards manual also, just because they have more steps and you can, make sure you didn't miss a step in order to get it working. But again, this just seems like it's taking a lot of that load off of the developer.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. Like, I want to know kind of what's happening there. But like, if you like commit everything before you install Colo-Loco and then just run it, you'll find out what it does. And it's pretty straightforward. It's not doing much.
Yeah. So after checking this out and seeing how easy it is going down this Colo-Loco path, it seems like one would be loco to not use this. So there has to be some gotchas.
Yeah, good question. So there are some gotchas.
Okay.
One is it is not available on Expo, of course. Now, that may change in the future because there are some cool native integrations with Expo. And I actually think that, I don't know, I should probably talk with the Expo folks and tell them, hey, you should just integrate this by default so you can build Expo apps with with co-located native modules. I think they'd actually like it. But also, it's not really set up for like, it's more set up for like, I guess I would say more one-off stuff. I think you could probably build some more complex native logic and have more files and stuff like that. But it's really more set up for like, you're going to have a few files, not necessarily a whole thing, It's also like on the Android side, it's assuming you're building everything under your main package and not like, multiple packages and stuff like that. If you start getting pretty complicated, you probably still want to work within your Android folder. The other thing is it makes it really easy to not use Xcode and not use Android Studio. You never have to open them, generally speaking, if you're using Colo-Loco, just out of the box. But Android Studio and Xcode do bring some things to the table. They're going to bring certain like code completion and things like that.
I was just going to say that, like, working in VS Code, you have to know what you're typing, essentially, whether it's Objective-C, Java, Swift, or Kotlin. Because Xcode and Android Studio do give you the prompts, autofill, and all that kind of stuff. Now, maybe there's a VS Code plugin out there that kind of does that for you. I'm not familiar with
GitHub Copilot.
GitHub Copilot.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't have any of those, and you're just a developer who wants to put together a text view or something of yours, or even just a regular, like Jamon did in his example, you have to know what you're typing, because you're not going to get the autofill that we're so used to with TypeScript and VS Code these days.
Yeah. So I think you can work through that. The other thing here is you can still open Xcode, and by the way, now it's right in your project. So Colo-Loco may have linked it in, but now Xcode just treats it as any other file. And when you make a change to that file in Xcode, it will change in VS Code as well. You'll see the change in both sides. So you can have that open. Android Studio is the same way. Because it's a hard link, when you go in there and open the file, it changes in both your app folder, next to your JSX, TSX, and in the Android folder. It changes in both locations. So that definitely will, it means that it's not a real limitation. It's just something you need to be aware of.
Okay, so then when it comes to Android Studio and Xcode, what are some cases where you would open up those two? Like if I wanted to include an asset into one of those native modules, would I have to open up one of those two?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jon Major. And for now, that's definitely what you would do. You would kind of add it the normal way. You'd add in, your assets, the way you did before. It's possible that in the future we could add some helpers to just, like somehow pick up on, hey, this image or other asset needs to be auto linked in, automatically, and then that would be kind of a cool idea. Not something on my radar right now, but if someone were to be using Colo-Loco and being like, hey, I really need this. I mean, I'd love the help on it.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to the whole documentation part and just be like, good job, Jamon, on that. Very detailed.
Thank you.
I went through it, and it was pretty much just copy paste. Didn't run into any issues. It built for me, and it, said, hi, Jamon. So it was perfect. Yeah. I even, went further and changed it to a text view with props.
Ooh,
nice.
And it worked seamlessly. Like I didn't really have anything. It took just a couple minutes to make those changes. Again, I had done that in the past, so I kind of had some code to refer to. I didn't have to open up Xcode and Android Studio and wait for them to build the million times they do build and all that stuff. It was revolutionary, I think. It was great. I really, thank you for the documentation. Please document stuff more, people.
Yes. Comment-driven development, Copilot.
Comment-driven development, yeah. And documentation, too.
Yes.
On stream, I did spend a lot of time on documentation. And I also did some things like so here's an example. I didn't have to do this, but one of the things I do is I parse the files and I try to figure out what class name you are using within your, native modules. And I match it up to your file name and make sure that you included the same file name as your class name. It's kind of important for how we do things. So just a little, and make sure I have a good error message when it doesn't happen. Just trying in even the setup script, it hopefully does a good job. You can run it multiple times and it won't mess up your project. If you already have things integrated manually, it will detect that and it won't try to make changes to it. I'm not saying it won't totally, it could totally screw some things up, but this thing is probably more manually tested than a lot of things I've put out in the past. But I do think that good documentation is super important, even for something as simple as this. I tried to make it so that someone who maybe didn't know native module development or components could actually jump in here and actually make some progress in a way that made them feel good. And I also like to, where I can, make the documentation very accessible. So an example of this is it's all one page. You can just hit Command F or Control F and search the README, and you'll find stuff in there. So yeah, I really, really wanted it to, I guess I want this to do well. I want this library to do well. And I know one way to do that is to have a good experience for the developer when they get into it.
Well, as of right now, there's 15 stars. So please go and star it.
I haven't. Now, by the time this comes out, I think that will have changed. But like, I haven't actually promoted it much other than on my stream.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So once I do have a blog post that I'm going to release, and I have a setup video that I'm going to release. I may do kind of a promo video that goes on Twitter as well, and try to get the word out there about this. I think that once people try it out, if they have any need for native modules or components at all, I think they're going to find it quite interesting.
Agreed.
Make it 17 stars. It just went up.
Nice.
Hey, there we go.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for also doing Kotlin and Swift. What were your thoughts about them?
Yeah, so that took actually a lot more work than I thought. And it was because it wasn't as straightforward to, I guess, find Swift examples for one thing, and also how do you set things up. That actually, I went down a long rabbit hole before I figured that out. And so in Kotlin was a little bit similar as well, where there were, in fact, I got to thank you, Mazen, for your repo, which you have dive into native updated. Yeah. So you're doing a blog post with Gant Laborde, and you're updating our examples that we had in for like native integration to Swift and Kotlin. And I was able to go in there and get a lot of ideas out of your repo. And that actually was probably my best help out of everything. So honestly, that was really nice. But one of the cool things is that I actually integrated it with Ignite. I integrated colo-loco by default with Ignite, our boilerplate. And in the process of doing that, I upgraded Ignite so that Kotlin and Swift are supported out of the box. So when you spin up a new non-Expo Ignite app, it's going to come with Kotlin and Swift support right away. You don't have to think about it. And it comes with colo-loco. So you can literally just drop in a .kt file into your structure. And next time you run Yarn Android, it's going to be available to through your native modules import or require native component.
Good stuff. So is there any feature enhancements on the docket?
Honestly, right now, I'm more worried about stability and making sure that it works the way that I would expect it to. And I want to see people use it in a real project and give me feedback. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing for right now. The idea that you had, Jon Major, about linking assets is a cool one, and that's something we could think about in the future. Although there may be some tooling out there already that does it, and we could combine the two. So that's kind of the main thing. But for now, I'm kind of considering it done, other than bug fixes.
Awesome.
I did also link in the show notes just a 9-minute video. So that's how long it takes. 9-minute video that you did, Jamon, like showing how colo-loco works in a project to create exactly what's in the README, essentially. So 9 minutes from spinning up an app to adding in your .h and m files and your Java files, and then building and seeing them come through. So be sure to check that out too.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something. If you go through that, watch that, I think you'll see the benefit of where colo-loco will come in handy. Cool. Well, that was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people think about that. Definitely tweet to me if you try it out. Let me know what you think about react-native-colo-loco. Today, I think we have a weird bug, don't we? It's another Mark one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I love the Mark ones.
Mark ones are the best. Mark Ricker, who's been on the program before, he posted a weird bug. And he says, have you ever had a text input where you're typing and then you go to submit by pressing a button and the button doesn't fire? It's on press handler, but instead it just closes the keyboard. He says this is likely happening because somewhere in the component hierarchy, there's a scroll view around your components. Scroll views are always the gesture handler's first responder unless you tell it not to be, or that it should only be the first responder if the gesture event wasn't handled by one of its children. Then he mentions a property called keyboard should persist taps.
That's a scroll view prop.
On the scroll view. Okay. And if you set it to handled, then, and remember, this has to be for any scroll view. So if they're nested like 2 or 3 deep, you need to make sure they all have this.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, this is for when someone wants their keyboard to persist when there's a tap outside of their keyboard, when there's a scroll view wrapped around components, right?
I guess essentially your button won't work how you want it to unless your scroll views say keyboard should persist tabs. Otherwise, the scroll view acts like it basically intercepts the tab.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And it'll close your keyboard.
It'll close your keyboard, yeah. And you need your button to be the first responder, the first thing that like reacts to the tab.
Mm-hmm.
And something Mark also mentions, if you have multiple scroll views, each one of these need to have this prop also for your button to happen.
Otherwise, they hijack it.
Yeah.
Right. It just bubbles up.
Yeah, and he struggled with this for a while and thought he would let us all know about that. He also links to an article and says that it really helped me wrap my head around keyboard should persist taps and what each value actually does. And this is on codeversuscolor.com. We'll link to that in the show notes.
This is another bug where I wonder how long it took him to figure it out. And now that he's got it, similar to the one we had last time with the time.
Right? Yeah, no, I know. These ones, that's why I want to kind of surface these weird bugs so people know like what's, they kind of, they'll remember vaguely like, hey, I remember hearing this on React Native Radio and hopefully it saves people some time. Cool. Well, fun episode. Where can people find you, Jon Major?
At Jon Major C.
Cool. And Mazen?
At Mazen Chami.
I'm Jamon Holmgren, at Jamon Holmgren on all the different places. You can also tweet at React Native Radio, at React Native RDIO. A quick scheduling note, we will be off for some of the holidays, so you may not see some episodes come out during the holidays. We'll be back in 2022. We have some really cool guests lined up, including one from Facebook who's going to be talking about the new architecture. Looking forward to that one. We have a bunch of other stuff. By the way, the new architecture may impact Colo-Loco. We may end up doing, turbo modules and stuff like that with Colo-Loco. Currently not handling that yet. It's still on sort of the bridge approach. But yeah, look for more content around that. As always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartoski, our social media coordinator, Missy Warren, our designer, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. And a special thanks to all of you for listening today. Make sure to subscribe on all the major podcasting platforms. Say that 10 times fast. React Native Radio is the name of this podcast. Reminder, we're hiring. Go to careers.infinite.red. We'll see you all next time.
See ya.
Bye.